listening to TMZ Movie Crashers.
Welcome back to TMZ's Movie Crashers. I'm your host, Fabian Garcia from TMZ.
I'm your host, Paige Catton from toofab.
Lots of movie news this week.
Yes.
Let's quickly go through what we are not going to discuss at length today, including the fact that they have greenlit a new Constantine sequel, I think after like 17 years or something.
Time.
It came out in like 2005, the original. That's interesting. Keanu Reeves is going to reprise his role. A new Karate Kid sequel is coming out. Sony announced that. And they said this is going to get back to the roots of the original. I don't really know what that means.
But it's not going to be, they say it's not going to be involved with Cobra Kai at all, which a Cobra Kai is a continuation. So does it mean it's not going to include like
I think it's going
the original actors?
I think the original actor is going to come back. Ralph Macchio.
Because he's in Cobra Kai though.
He is in Cobra Kai. So you're right. It's like, what are they going to do? Because like because they've already kind of done a karate. Anyway, so we'll see. We'll see what comes to that. I just want to see some chores done in the new one. I want to see chores done. I want to see some painting. What else? Margot Robbie apparently was, quote, mortified by the fact that there were so many set leaks when they were filming Barbie out here in Venice, which is such a ridiculous statement because you're out in one of the most public places in LA. And you're Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling dressed in these ridiculous outfits. Of course there's going to be massive set leaks. It's just such a idiotic...
They'd be in the middle of nowhere in those outfits and people would...
That would be something, but she just sounds ridiculous saying that. Ezra Miller. Apparently the Ezra Miller saga is way more involved and complicated than we ever thought. He's a weird... They are a weirdo, apparently, according to this Vanity Fair expose. People should go read it. It's actually very disturbing. More disturbing than we ever thought. Yeah. What else? What else am I missing here?
Woody Allen.
Woody Allen apparently was going to retire, but then took it back and says he's not going to retire. And there was a lot of discussion about the legacy of Woody Allen. And look, I mean, they cannot be denied, regardless of the allegations against him. He has had a huge impact in cinema and film. And I got to be honest, I don't really care about Woody Allen anymore. Like it's not 1975 anymore, or 77, or the 80s. The Woody Allen saga is dead and gone. I don't really care about his movies that much anymore. But he's not retiring, so there you go. But we're not going to talk about that stuff. Where we are going to start today is with the big motion picture, biggest movie story of the week. Yeah. We have got to talk about The Woman King, Viola Davis's new movie with John Boyega also attached. It came out this weekend in theaters, and it actually kind of killed at the box office.
Yeah,
it didn't kill. It performed well. It took number one. I think it raked in $19 million.
And they expect it to be like 12.
Right, so it exceeded expectations. Did pretty well at the box office, getting rave reviews by both audiences and critics alike.
Really, really high reviews.
We both saw it.
Yeah,
and I got to say, I want to start off by saying it is a very good movie. Incredibly good. The reviews are warranted. It's objectively a great movie as far as entertainment value.
Yeah.
Incredible entertainment value, good action, good storylines, good character development, some impactful moments, a lot of emotions.
Great performances.
But it was great set pieces too. Yes. The production value was high.
It was just very powerful.
It was powerful. It was an
film.
Objectively solid, entertaining movie. I want to start there. The problem, though, is with the history. Yep. It kind of fudges the historical accuracy. I'm not going to even say a little bit, quite a bit it does. And essentially what this has to do with is this tribe, not even, it's
a kingdom.
It's a kingdom, you're right. It's a kingdom known as the Dahomey Kingdom. They were real. It was a real kingdom in West Africa in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries that was when they were most in power at the time. And they were participating in the Atlantic slave trade at the time. They were one of a handful of, I keep calling them tribe, but they were one of a handful of kingdoms/tribes that were going around capturing other tribes and oftentimes selling those folks to Europeans. And they were participating in this and facilitating it for a long time. And the movie addresses this. It addresses this right from the get-go. There's a raid. They take the Mahi village people prisoner, and it shows you that they were the Dahomey tribe. They were actively doing this. The movie kind of downplays their role a little bit because although they acknowledge that they were actively participating in this, as the movie goes along, Viola Davis's character, she's talking to the king, portrayed by John Boyega, and she's kind of trying to convince him, hey, we got to get out of this slave trade business. We got to get out of this. The Europeans, they want to conquer us all, blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to spoil it, but we're going to spoil it here. At the end of the movie, The king says in a very kind of grand speech, like, okay, we're done with this business. We're over. We're done with selling our brethren, yada, 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 yada. We're getting out of the slave trade. The movie takes place, they depict it as taking place in 1823. So basically by the end of the movie, sometime in the 1820s, it seems, they make it seem that the Dahomey did in fact stop participating in the slave trade.
Yeah.
That's not correct. They continued participating in the slave trade through the 1850s, I believe even the 60s a little bit.
I think that's what
And the British Army had to step in and block their ports because the Dahomey, they were an incredibly powerful kingdom. They were controlling the ports of West Africa at the time, and they were in charge of all of that. So they continued doing it through the 1850s and 1860s. The British Army had to literally come in with a blockade to finally stop them, and that's when it finally came to an end.
And we should note that the film focuses on an all-female warrior unit called the Agoge.
Correct.
Which is led by Viola Davis. She's
yes.
the general, and that's like the main focus of the movie.
Right.
But the warriors in the film are portrayed as like liberators.
They're portrayed as liberators and the good guys, essentially.
And the good guys, essentially.
Yes.
And they aid and they're against the slave trade and all this stuff. But in reality, as we learned,
yes,
they even, would take some people, other tribes or kingdoms prisoner
for themselves and or sell them off
to the slave trade.
And the thing is, it was a lucrative business. They were making a ton of money from the Europeans. And there's also, people were floating this out there too, which I believe is true, that the Dahomey were potentially doing this to avoid being enslaved themselves, that they were kind of in this kind of devil's deal essentially with the Europeans saying, okay, fine, we'll help you enslave fellow Africans if you don't enslave us, essentially. I'm sure that there's some truth to that as well. The fact is, it's an ugly history. It's an ugly history, and the movie does, in fact, downplay and kind of water down that ugly history. It shows that, yes, they were participating in the slave trade, but the movie really portrays Viola Davis as we don't have to do this anymore. And they make it seem that she did in fact convince the king
sell palm oil instead.
To sell palm oil instead, and that's not what happened. It waters it down, and it kind of glamorizes / glorifies / lionizes this group, the Agoge, as like liberators and heroes and almighty. They were ruthless. This was a ruthless kingdom at the time. They were going around, because in the movie, they also portray the Dahomey kingdom as the ones being oppressed by a rival tribe.
The Oyo.
The Oyo kingdom.
And they're seen as ones that are like way more deep in the slave trade, when it's actually probably the Dahomey were worse, if not
because the Oyo kingdom was also involved in the Atlantic slave trade. But the reality is that because the historians have weighed in on this. People who know their stuff have weighed in on this. And it was actually the Dahomey who were the more powerful kingdom. They were the ones that were going around sort of doing the oppressing a little bit. Yes, they were warring and feuding with different factions in West Africa, but the Dahomey were the ones going around mostly doing this.
In the film, it's portrayed that the Oyo are the ones that
exactly.
did it.
So they have it reversed in the films to make the Dahomey people look like they're the ones that are under the thumb of the Oyo kingdom. That's not in fact the case.
Yeah.
And as a result of this history kind of surfacing as the release of this movie was coming out, there was this trend on Twitter, hashtag boycott the Woman King, and there was a lot of people all up in arms about it, and there was outrage essentially. That obviously didn't work. People went to go see this movie, but the thing for me though, there was a lot of people in the media that were defending the movie, and they were basically saying go see the movie for yourself before you weigh in, because there were a lot of people before I went to go see it. There were a lot of people online saying the movie does in fact address their ugly history. It does in fact wrestle with it, but that's not entirely forthright, because it does,
but not enough,
not accurately
and
enough,
not accurately.
Right?
Yeah, it makes it seem like, again, the whole thing. You're like, oh, you're rooting for Naniska, or I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah, correct.
The Viola Davis character.
Naniska,
you want her. She's you're rooting for her because she's throughout many reasons you're rooting for her.
Yeah, she's the protagonist, right?
But she also goes through all this work to convince the king to stop this. It's the Dahomey's role in the slave trade,
right.
And in the end, it happens. It works. He said, "We're done."
Right at the end of the movie, he says,
and
"We're
so you're
out of it."
"Oh wow, what
it's
a happy
feel
ending!"
Good. It's a feel good ending,
and then you find out that wasn't true.
It's not true.
It's
and
just, yeah.
So there's an article that this historian and professor wrote for Slate magazine, which is a reputable magazine. It's not a right-wing magazine.
No.
If anything, Slate leans left.
Yeah.
She wrote this article for them. It's called, the title of it is "The Woman King Softens the Truth of the Slave Trade." Her name is Ana Lucia Arajo. She's a PhD. She's a professor at Howard University. and she specializes in the Atlantic slave trade. So she knows her stuff. And if you go read her article, she outlines all the fudges, basically.
And in simple terms, too.
Very simple terms, easy to understand. So she basically, by the end of it, her conclusion is like, it was a great movie, which I think everyone can acknowledge. It was a great movie. Objectively, entertainment value was there, but it's just historically inaccurate. And then, so with that said, there are people that are crying foul because there are people that are responding to the criticism of this, and they're saying, oh, but what about this? What about the King Arthur movies? What about all these other white European historical movies that are historically inaccurate that you guys never criticize? Why is all the criticism coming on this? That's a valid point. There are tons of movies that depict lots of history movies, like, you know, Columbus movies.
All the time. Right.
That don't really show the true ugliness of the history. And that criticism is valid. Yeah. I acknowledge that criticism is valid, but when you do the whataboutism,
I was just about to say that whataboutism.
It's a whataboutism, and it kind of deflects from the criticism that you're facing, that's movies facing.
And this happens all the time. People say like criticism about one thing, and they go, well, what about this? And what about this?
Exactly. So rather than just deal with what the criticism is and just get to the root of it, they deflect and they do whataboutism, and that's kind of what's happening here too. Viola Davis has weighed in on this. She has weighed in on this. She and her husband, who's also her producing partner, they sat down for an interview with Variety, I believe. Variety asked them about, hey, how do you respond to this criticism and this hashtag boycott the Woman King? What do you have to say about it? People are saying that it's not really all that accurate when it comes to history. And what did Viola have to say about it?
So Viola said, first of all, I agree with Gina Price Blythewood, the director. Saying if you're not going to win an argument on Twitter, we entered the story.
Which is such a cop-out answer. The director said that, like, oh, you're not going to win an argument on Twitter. That's like complete cop-out answer. She didn't actually address the root of the issue, but go on.
And she says, we entered the story where the kingdom was in flux at a crossroads. They were looking to find some way to keep their civilization and kingdom alive. It wasn't until the late 1800s that they were decimated. Most of the story is fictionalized. It has to be. And then,
so Viola Davis, we should pause. Right off the bat, Viola Davis is saying the movie is fictionalized, which is obviously true because they fudge the history. But the movie has been marketed as like, oh my God,
historical epic.
Yeah, historical epic based on true events. Yes. So the movie is trying to tell you, the marketing at least, from the trailer and all the marketing, everything from Sony, that, oh my God, this is what really happened. That's how they're trying to portray it to the public.
Even on IMDb, Wikipedia, that's what it's labeled as. Like, this really happened.
Exactly. But now here's Viola Davis saying, no. I mean, it's based on true events, but it's fictionalized. So. Yeah. But that's not how it was marketed. So it's a disingenuous rollout of this movie. That's what this seems to me, right? What did her husband have to say?
Okay, so he
took
said
it even further.
Yeah, he took it even further. So he said, we are now what we call edutainment. It's history, but we have to take license. We have to entertain people. If we just told a history lesson, which we very well could have, that would be a documentary. Unfortunately, people wouldn't be in the theaters doing the same thing we saw this weekend. We didn't want to shy away from the truth. The history is massive, and there are truths on that are there. If people want to learn more, they can investigate more.
That is such a disingenuous. I don't like that answer. He's basically saying, look, like, it's an entertainment movie. We take license with this, and I guess maybe that can be assumed going forward now. Yeah. Maybe that should have been assumed from the get-go. But I think they and Sony were banking on people's ignorance. They were banking on people not being lazy and not looking into the actual history. And now that the actual history has surfaced, now they're trying to be like, well, it's a movie. I mean, come on, forget about it. Like, I don't like that. I don't like this answer. It makes me, it's icky to me. It feels like a shrug of the shoulders to me. Yeah. And it feels disingenuous. It feels kind of, I don't like the way it has a bad taste in my mouth. Again, the movie is phenomenal. Yeah. But if you would have marketed it from the beginning, and I mean, look, they did say it's based on true events. It is in fact based on true events, but they were really pushing it as like, this really happened. That was the vibe I got from all the trailers and all the marketing and all the promos and everything. They were pushing as like, this is the real thing. It's not, though. It's not. Now, after all the backlash, now you're actually addressing, it's a movie. It's fictionalized. It is what it is.
We got to take license. Well, it's like, and then it's like, we didn't want to make a documentary. Okay, well, it's not a documentary, obviously. It's not based on, not completely historically accurate. Why didn't they just make it fictionalized from the get-go? Why did they have to market it like this?
I agree. They should have just made a movie that was based on the Dahomey tribe. They didn't have to call it the Dahomey, because in the movie, that's what I'm saying. The movie is like, they call themselves the Dahomey. So these are a real tribe.
The king he plays is the real
king's name. So
Like,
if they would have just done a movie with a different tribe name, different king name, just made it fictionalized, then
Exactly.
it would have been more. It would have been softer. It would have been fine. I'm like, okay, it's based on the Dahomey, but the movie actually calls them. You know what I mean? Like they're taking up they're trying to take up the real history, but they're trying to also ignore the ugliness of the real history too. It's like you can't do that. You can't have it both ways. I love the movie, but my takeaway on this is that the reality of it does not. It makes the movie less impactful for me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because I watched the movie and I was like, God, this is so great. It would be awesome if this was what really happened, but it's not. It's like it's almost like you're blatantly trying to ignore the reality, which is such a disingenuous, such a phony thing. It's like I don't like it. It kind of takes away the bigness of this movie for me. I know I'm not saying this eloquently right now, but that's
No, I get what you mean completely because
Yeah.
I felt that way too. I mean, I was just so upset and like so disappointed because I kind of knew a little bit about the boycott stuff
Right.
before I saw it, but not like the details of it.
Right.
And so after I saw the movie and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like it's so powerful. I loved it. The performances were amazing. And then
and all that is true, by the way.
It is.
And people
It needs to be
I
true.
should say, people should go see this movie. Don't boycott something.
No.
Go see it for yourself.
Yeah.
And we can have a spirited debate about it.
Then you can criticize it.
Yeah.
Don't criticize something before you see it.
I
hate
agree.
when people
That
do that.
I agree with. Don't
Especially
criticize
these
something
days.
if you haven't seen it yet.
At least know what you're talking about.
Exactly. At least know what you're talking about. But yes, I mean, on an objective level, it fudged the history. But go on.
Yeah. So it just, and then after realizing all the historical inaccuracies, I was just like, it took away from that
my enjoyment of
the
it.
enjoyment of it.
for
And now
me.
it puts a bad taste in my mouth, and it makes me feel disappointed
a
and
little
upset,
icky?
a little icky.
little
Kind of
icky,
like an
yeah.
icky feeling in your stomach, kind of
Right,
thing.
because you're championing, like in the movie, you're like, hell yeah.
And
but,
I also,
but
like-
then when you sit back and you realize, like, wait, I'm supporting and championing this group, which were pretty ruthless. They did
Exactly.
some atrocious things.
And we talked about this briefly before. Of course, we did today's
Yes.
podcast. Jeez, I don't know
You're good.
I don't
You're
know what
good.
that was.
You're good. You're good.
But Lupita
Nyong'o, yes.
originally was,
She was attached to this movie.
this project.
She was.
And then-
so first of all, she comes from like Africa herself.
Mm-hmm.
She's like actually African. And she was attached to this movie. She learned about the Dahomey.
The true story.
About it, and then she pulled out of this movie.
Yeah.
She said, "I'm sorry, I can't make a movie that lionizes and glorifies this group because, frankly, they were shitty. They were a shitty kingdom. They did some very shitty things. And there's a video. People can go find it on Twitter if they want. But she's talking about the Dahomey.
She's
She's
crying.
crying.
Yeah.
She's talking about how many people they helped enslave, and she was not comfortable depicting that history, especially in this fictionalized way. And I got to be honest. I know it's a movie and whatever, and it's fine. But like, I got to say, this is a bad look for Viola Davis, in my opinion.
I know, and
This
that's what
is a
makes me even
stain-
more upset.
It is. It's a stain on her reputation and a little bit of a stain on her legacy, in my opinion. And same for John Boyega too. These are big stars,
And John
and they
Boyega-
should have, in my opinion, they should have known better. They should, because I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be depicting a group like this and trying to make them seem heroic when in fact they were the opposite. You know what I mean?
So do you think ultimately that Sony or the cast went
Knew.
into this thinking that not enough people know the true history, so it doesn't matter?
First of all, you know I'm a cynic, and the cynic in me says I'd like to assume no, and that everyone was just kind of like maybe nobody knew, but come on, you're making a movie. By the way, the writers of this movie are a couple of white women. I want to note that.
I
the
saw
the
that.
director's a black
Yes.
woman, but the writers are two white women. So there you go. That speaks volumes to me.
Yeah.
But yes, I do believe that Sony and or Viola and or the producers of this movie knew damn well what they were doing, and they were trying to pull a fast one on the public. The public's ignorant. They're not going to look into this. They're going to embrace this as some like feminist empowering thing or whatever, which is kind of how it's been taken in.
Yeah.
And I think they were banking on people not looking it up and not finding out the truth. But now the truth is surfacing, and it's not good. And again, I got to say, especially as Viola Davis is the face of this, and which is such a shame because she's such a good actress. I just want to note that she's good in this movie.
She's
too.
getting Oscar buzz for this.
She's getting Oscar buzz, and again, like on an objective acting level, that buzz is warranted.
Yeah.
So it's like two things can be true at the same time. The movie can be great, but it's not historically accurate. But not only is it not historically accurate, it's kind of ugly because you're making heroes out of people that were really doing something atrocious and terrible at the time. And again, like, yes, the Europeans are mostly to blame. We should mention that too. The Europeans were the ones who were doing the slave trade, but It's a murky and gray area, and it's just a shame. And
so it's just
I
disappointing.
mean, look, the box office is doing well.
Yeah.
The movie's going to make its money back. I'm sure that's all the studio really cares about at the end of the day. Maybe Viola too. Who knows? But it's an interesting one. So
but I still recommend seeing it for yourself.
I agree. People should go see it for themselves and make up their own minds. With that, we're going to move on to our next segment, the Hollywood Hoedown. That's right. We got to do it every single day. There we go. And this one we're going to kind of keep brief. The trailer for I Want to Dance with Somebody, which is the Whitney Houston biopic, finally dropped with Naomi Ackie as the lead, and it is really good. Let's hear a little bit of it ourselves real quick.
There's a boy I know, he's the one I dream of.
What's your name again?
Whitney Elizabeth Houston.
So there it is, and people can go watch the full trailer. It is really good.
Yes.
Naomi Ackie looks the part. The wardrobe is amazing. She's not singing.
No.
We should mention that it's all Whitney Houston's real vocals, which is understandable because Whitney Houston's voice is literally one of a kind. She was, I would argue, one of the best singers, if not the best singer, as far as like R&B and pop singers go.
I honestly think that it would have been not a good idea to have someone sing.
It's impossible.
It's
even
the voice. Like
Clive,
you can't
Clive
have someone
Davis,
else.
who was the producer, the record producer who discovered Whitney Houston, he's also a producer for this movie. There's an interview where he said it was while Naomi Ackie tried singing and she did a decent job. Nobody can match Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
It's an impossible task, which I agree with. So, and I actually kind of commend them for scrapping and just leading with Whitney's voice because. Whitney's voice is such one of a kind, and it's also just good to hear Whitney Houston singing again. And I know
The trailer just made me so happy.
I mean, because do you know the movie's going to go through all her iconic moments in the Super Bowl, and it's also going to cover her dive into drug use and her eventual death. But the Naomi Ackie, from what I've read, because we talked about this briefly before when she was the first look of her came out with the poster. Yeah. Naomi Ackie at first was like really trying to kind of match Whitney Houston's voice and everything to a T.
Yeah.
But the director eventually told her, no, just get the mannerisms. Like we want to see what Whitney Houston was like behind the scenes. That's what we're really trying to see. So that's where the acting comes in from Naomi Ackie. And I got to say, it looks incredible. With these big biopics about musicians, iconic musicians, especially somebody like Whitney Houston, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge. It's so hard to live up to the legacy of that person. I'm excited about this movie. So far, it looks like it's gonna cover it well. Because Whitney Houston has a dark history too. You know what I mean? Like it's
from the trailer. I mean, they show a glimpse of her marriage or wedding to Bobby Brown,
right?
But I'm. This is going to sound kind of like weird, but I kind of hope that they're going to address the dark stuff as well.
They are.
I'm assuming they are.
I think they are
because it says like the Whitney you never knew and stuff like that. But that's obviously the behind the scenes. But
right.
I was wondering that because in the description, Sony had said. It was like a no-holds-barred portrait of the complex and multifaceted woman behind the voice, chronicling her early years, rise to fame, and trailblazing life and career. So I don't feel like I want to see that stuff, the drug addiction and eventual death, but I feel like they have to include it.
I think they are going to include it. I don't want the movie to focus on that, obviously. I want to see the best of Whitney Houston.
Of course.
That's what everybody wants to remember, and that's what everyone, frankly, does remember.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna. My guess is that toward the end of the movie, they're gonna show her when she's like in addiction.
I assume they're going to, but they didn't show any of that in the trailer, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Well, I don't. Yeah, it's especially for like the buzzy type trailer. I get it. Like you don't want to we want to focus
maybe trailer
on,
2,
right? Maybe trailer 2 or something. But for the first trailer, it makes sense to me just to kind of hype up all the good stuff.
Yeah.
It looks amazing.
And Stanley Tucci's playing Clive Davis, and I love Stanley Tucci. He looks great.
I'm very excited to see this movie. It comes out in December.
Yeah.
Loved it, and it was big news last week too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I have to say about it.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic.
It looks fun.
Naomi Ackie looks great.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be so good to have Whitney Houston songs trending again and charting again, as they rightly should, because they're fantastic.
Yeah.
So
and like her national anthem, like at Super Bowl, I've watched that. It's like the best national anthem performance
if you want to get
ever.
yourself hyped up, watch that anthem.
It's on YouTube.
So with that, I think we can move on to our final segment, which is what'd you see, what'd you think? We both saw different things this weekend.
Yeah.
I saw Pearl with Mia Goth, which is the sequel/prequel to X, which was the A24 film with Kid Cudi. And it's kind of like an old school slasher film. I can talk about that first, unless you want to talk about...
You can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So I saw Pearl last night, and I know it's getting a lot of hype. Have you been hearing about the hype?
Yes.
It's getting tons of hype, and people are like, oh my God, Mia Goth's a queen, blah, 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 a horror queen, all this stuff. She may well be a horror queen because like she definitely delved into the role. I'll say that, and committed to it. It's basically because if you remember from the movie X, if people have seen it, the old lady in the movie Pearl is the killer. She's like this crazy deranged woman going around killing these like people that are making a porno on her ranch, and she's sort of sex obsessed. And there's allusions to her being fame obsessed as well. Spoiler alert, she dies at the end of X. But Pearl is kind of showing you the young version of Pearl when she's young and kind of what all that's about. And essentially, without ruining it, Pearl is exactly that. She's obsessed with becoming a dancer. She lives on this farm in like the middle of Texas. This is like during World War I times. And she lives with a very authoritarian mother and a father. And this is during the pandemic, by the way. Like Pearl takes place during the Spanish influenza period, so it's very they're wearing masks. Very reminiscent of what's going on today. But yeah, so Pearl is trying to break out. She wants to get into Hollywood. She wants to be famous. And in this really like kind of like deep down drive she has, she starts diving into madness. It's a spiral into madness. She starts killing her parents and stuff, and people that start coming to the ranch. And it's very corny. I want to say that. Really? It's very corny. It's the shots, the way it's filmed, it reminded me of The Wizard of Oz actually a lot. There's a lot of reminiscence to The Wizard of Oz and some of the coloring and things like that. That's kind of the beauty of the film, like the way it's colored and the way it's shot. It's very old school, as if it's like an actual 70s movie. It's corny and like it's not scary. It's not as, I know it's pegged as a horror movie, but it's not scary. It's more of just like a descension into madness and just a character study.
So I could see it.
You could see it. It's not that scary. Even when she like kills people, it's kind of cartoony. Yeah. She's like, ah! Like just like.
Well, I saw like the thing with like the alligator and like the pitchfork.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's very like it kind of has a grindhouse vibe. You know, like grindhouse movies from the 70s. They're so over the top and ridiculous. That's kind of how this movie is.
You almost like laugh at it.
You laugh at it a little bit. And there's a lot of talk about this 6-minute monologue that Mia Goth delivers toward the end of the movie. And people are like, "Oh my God, that was incredible! It blew me away." It's long, and I was like, "God damn, she's still talking!" And like, I know it's getting a lot of hype, and yeah, it's well written, I suppose, but runs way too long and not nearly as impactful as people are claiming it is. There's going to be another movie coming out called Maxine, which follows the survivor from X. Yes,
right?
Yeah. So, and Mia Goth is playing all these characters, by the way. She does a really good job. I don't think it's that good. It's not nearly as good as X. X was way better, and it was more of a traditional horror movie. Mia Goth did well though, and that monologue does not live up to the hype in my opinion. So that's kind of where I leave Pearl a little bit. What about you? You saw something, right?
Okay, so I watched Do Revenge, the Netflix film that everyone's talking about.
Yes.
A dark comedy starring Maya Hawke and Camila Mendes, along with some other young adult actresses. And actors and actresses, sorry. I loved it so much that I even watched it twice.
It was trending all weekend on Twitter.
Yeah, people are like obsessed that it's like the number one Netflix film.
People are saying it's reminiscent of Mean Girls.
Yes.
Is that true?
So it's Mean Girls, Clueless. Wow. Like it has those like late
90s,
late 90s,
2000s.
early 2000s vibe. Yeah. Definitely some references and nods to that.
Okay. So it's about like a high school girls, right, that are like seeking revenge.
Well,
Is
yeah.
that the gist?
Yes, but that's the gist, and they team up, and like one's like a new girl, and one's like the mean girl, and they kind of team up, a fallen queen kind of. Okay. But what makes this film stand apart from these other like corny Netflix young adult films and stuff like that.
There are a lot.
There are a lot.
Yes.
Is the writing. So it's written by, I have her name right here, Jennifer Caton Robinson, who also, she's directed and co-written by, co-write the film. And she also did Someone Great, which was another good Netflix film. I don't know if you ever saw that. Another Netflix standout. But
I'm very anti-Netflix.
I know you are.
I watch very few Netflix movies.
So it's clever, and the plot twist is so unexpected, which for these kind of films, I was just predicting what was going to happen. Sure. You thought, oh, it's going to end like this. This is going to happen, and then it's all, happy ending, da-da-da.
Right.
No. There's a huge plot twist.
Wow.
You don't know what's going to happen next. And the aesthetic was amazing. The colors were amazing. The costumes were epic. The costuming was awesome. Wow. And there's the attention to details I really loved too. Like even like Maya Hawke's character Nora, or Eleanor, she goes by both names. she has a like pet like iguana or lizard of some sort.
Yeah.
And her name's like winner Olivia Colman.
That's the name.
That's her name. And she even has like
Oscar winner.
Camila Mendes like makes her the little like robe for like the iguana. Like
my
just like little
gosh.
funny details like that. And then the
Right.
writing was just impeccable and I
Okay.
absolutely loved it. It's campy. It's such a blast. It's so
Right.
much fun. Again, I've already watched it twice, but I'll watch it again.
That's interesting because so a lot of like these like comedy rom-com type Netflix movies, like you said, most of them are not that good. They're kind of like throwaway movies, just kind of like just straight to DVD type movies. I've said this in the past about Netflix movies or Netflix originals. Sounds like this is the opposite. It's a standout.
It's total Netflix standout.
Wow.
It's getting great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes as well.
is.
People are loving it. So honestly, if you're against Netflix films like Fabian, often I suggest you give us a chance. It
Okay.
is so much fun. And the soundtrack is awesome.
Wow.
And
Original music or okay?
but
They got some
yes,
good. Okay,
but like
good.
the music they chose was just so fitting for all the
Right,
scenes.
right.
And yeah, and there's some like characters you love, characters that are so unlikable.
Right.
And it also has like a lot of people pointed this out. It's kind of like a multiverse of like very like young adult shows. So there's
Yeah.
like actors from Euphoria, Outer Banks,
Oh, no kidding.
Riverdale, Stranger Things, obviously
Wow.
Maya.
So they brought all
13
those
Reasons
people
Why.
together for
Yeah,
this
and Pretty
movie.
Little Liars. They all have like an actor from all these shows. So it's
Wow.
like they kind of
Okay.
like, I don't know if that was intentional, but it kind of
sounds-
it's pretty cool that they did that.
That sounds pretty fun. And if it is in fact a throwback to like the 90s and the 2000s, like those movies of those
Yeah.
times, that's good because like those movies were, by today's standards, those are considered quote toxic movies.
Yeah.
Like, the toxicity. I miss the toxicity of the 2000s. I want it back. And if this movie, it sounds like it has a little bit of that.
Oh yeah, there's some like burns, I would you
Oh,
say, that are
shit.
like you're just like, oh, like
Okay.
shit. Like some things that like they don't really kind of like soften burns in movies
Right,
these
right,
days
right.
when
Of
it
course
comes
they do.
to
They're
like
not as mean as they used
They're
to
not as
be.
mean, but some of them I was like, okay, all
Right.
right, here we go. Yeah, so I
So it's a
highly recommend
throwback
it. It's a
then.
throwback. There's definitely a lot of throwback. And I forgot a big part of it. Sarah Michelle Gellar is in it and plays
No
the principal.
way, Michelle.
Yes.
Wow.
The icon.
She's
of,
the 90s
yes,
icon, dude.
Yes.
I know what you did last summer. Scream
Yes.
2. Yes.
She plays like the headmaster of this private school. So that just
I love Sarah Michelle Gellar. She was
it was
great.
just the icing on top of the cake that she was in this film. So,
Okay, so this
yeah.
actually sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you for that review. I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in with us. We appreciate it. Check us out on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube, on the website as well. And we will check in with you guys next time.
See ya.
Take it easy.